Hello and welcome to our 50th episode of Koller Commentary.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you. I thought it would be special to celebrate a 50 by bringing in our OG co-host from Enjoy the Wonder, Won Hee Lee.
I completely forgot you guys were doing this together before.
Yeah. We were the OG hosts.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, welcome, Won Hee.
Thank you. It's nice to be back. It's been a long time.
Yeah, how do you feel being the guest for the 50th episode?
I had no idea this was 50.
I know. I thought I'd surprise you by saying it on the pod.
I feel a lot more pressure now.
Yeah.
I feel like I need to say wise and insightful things.
Yes. So Won Hee is visiting us from Houston for a couple nights, and it's been nice to just feel like old days.
Old days.
Won Hee has been kind of like the only friend, not the only, but one of the few friends that have seen Matt and I from pretty much the beginning of our relationship until now with 2 kids.
I thought you were going to say one of the few friends that we have, period.
I think you guys have lots of friends. What do you mean?
That wouldn't really make sense because we have a lot of friends we love.
Yeah.
But Won Hee has a special place in our heart because of his role and the many fights he has instigated. For us.
That's true. Instigated, observed.
Yeah.
Been a bystander too.
Right.
Yeah.
In fairness, the way you instigate is by asking us, "Oh, how did y'all meet?"
Yeah. Very innocent questions.
How did y'all start dating?
Very innocent questions. Questions that anyone can normally ask.
Oh, I still remember that dinner in front of Myeongdong.
I will say though, I remember I asked the question and then it started getting a little tense, and then Enju was like, "Let's talk about this later because it's gonna lead to some awkwardness." I was like, "It's fine."
But the thing is, you were supposed to come over after to play games.
Yeah.
I remember like none of this.
Yeah, and so we fought, but I was like, "We're gonna get over this, and we're gonna play games with Won Hee."
Yeah.
Anyways, we digress. Yeah. Today's main topics will be about mental health. We have Dr. Matt Koller.
Yeah, I'm here as my professional self today.
He is actually our featured guest. And then Won Hee is joining me as a host as we ask Matt just about his year being an official attending. Is it an attending if it's like...
I don't actually know. I think an attending is usually like
at a hospital?
Like a trainer, like a doctor.
An official physician with making the big money, honey, every 15th and 30th. I'm like, ooh la la, I'm married a doctor, not no resident. And then it goes straight to your loans and our house.
Sexy.
Yep, it vanishes real quick.
Yeah, but I think it would be nice. You know, I have had several episodes just about mental health in a different lens and perspectives, and also now you have had a year under your belt. Won Hee and I love to have this conversation as well, and we've had our own kind of journeys within what that looks like, and so I think it would just be an overall theme of today, as well as we're ending the year 2023, and if there's any reflections or questions we like to ask each other, because now our friendship is more distanced. And yeah. All right, well, let's go straight into it. Dr. Koller, are you ready?
Sure.
So you have been a practitioner for over a year, and I would just love to kind of hear, one, what is your specialty? Who do you kind of work with or see? And how has this year been for you so far?
Well, I'm a psychiatrist, so that's the MD version of the mental health world. I would say more than half the people think I'm a psychologist.
Yeah.
But that's the other one.
I'm kind of surprised how many people get that confused.
I don't know if I knew before med school even.
Oh, really?
I don't know. I was very out of this. My whole field came randomly. This was never a thing I was passionate about.
So my understanding of psychologists has always just been an assumption that psychologists are the ones who go to universities and they're the PhDs. And
then you as a psychiatrist obviously went the medical route. And so a big differentiation is that you prescribe medication.
Yeah.
Is that the only differentiation?
So we
he just gives out drugs.
I mean, kinda. My residency had a more therapy focused training than most. Most are even more just medication focused. Baylor has it pretty good emphasis. It's one of its like draws, I think, for a lot of people. So I dabbled in it. Yes. I do not like what psychologists do or therapists do is very impressive. It's very hard to hold an intentional conversation for an hour and to like guide it in a way that is thoughtful. I felt so bad for the patients in residency that I did therapy with, because I was just
no, but you got an award for that. Remember, like I remember in residency, you were like complimented.
All I know is when I was with a patient, I was even like, I could barely even focus on what they were saying, because I was just trying to think of a next question to ask them to fill the time to get to an hour.
To get paid. Not in residency.
So now I think what I do is much more fitting. It's like, the initial session is an hour, but that's just like truly getting to know someone. But then after that, it's like shorter visits where it's more medication focused, but still knowing them and digging into their life and trying to have like a full kind of holistic care.
I apologize, Dr. Koller. I didn't give you a proper introduction for all the schooling that you have received.
That he paid for.
Yes. And because I did get married to him in that time. But Dr. Matt Koller comes from UT Austin with a degree from public relations. And then he went to about almost 2 years at Weber and Shamwick. Weber and Schwick. One of his great clients was, I believe, an airline, right?
Yeah.
And then he decided.
What is Weber and Schwick?
Shamwick.
Weber Shandwick. It's a PR firm.
So okay. he worked for 2 years. One of a great PR firm. If you're in PR and you're listening, you're like, oh, okay, Matthew. But then he realized he wanted to do something maybe with more tangible meaning or tangible purpose. Not saying PR is not with purpose. He just decided, all right, let me go back to school and do the MCATs. So because of PR, you had to go back to regular college again, and then you had to do like 2 more years of science classes.
Yeah, I took 0 science classes.
Yeah, so you chose to go back to school.
Science is my worst subject.
Exactly. And then you did the MCAT and the LSAT, and then you...
LSAT?
Mm-hmm.
Like lawyer school? Lawyer test?
Before, I took that in like 2011 when I didn't really know what I was going to do.
Wow, you really explored all the options.
Yeah.
I mean, who just goes back and says, I'm going to be a doctor, redo college, kind of. But then after that, you were accepted to UTESCA, UT Health Science Center San Antonio, where we met Won Hee. And then after that, you had your residency in Baylor College of Medicine. And now we are here. And so what made you decide on psychiatry?
When I went through med school, it was my last rotation. I had 0 insight or exposure to it at all until the very end. And then when I got to it, I realized the most debilitating illness I had seen in all of residency was not anything physical. It was the mental health illness that like you can't fix it and be okay after like a surgical procedure like a month later. It's like if you don't fix it, then like 30 years later your life is going to be exponentially worse. So that's like the most insidious long-term suffering someone can endure, and I thought it was a very powerful thing to be a part of, like that healing. And I also found it interesting because it's the only field where it's prioritized to know someone's life. I thought maybe you get that in like family medicine. I quickly realized that's not the case. Like it's only in psychiatry, like a part of your assessment is to know as much as you can about someone, and I like that. I was never like a procedure guy. So yeah, I was very drawn to like a field that you have to know people to do your job and to help people in a way that like decades later it's impactful, I guess.
One of the reasons I like having Won Hee on these types of conversations is also one of the ways he really helped as a friend is that he would ask Matt the good questions throughout med school and residency. So like I felt like I was learning stuff. And so I'm kind of excited to ask you more so about your year in terms of now where you are today. And in this shift from becoming a resident now to a prescribing physician without a supervisor above you, this is a question Won Hee suggested. I just have the notes. What shifts in the psychiatry space have you noticed in this past year?
I think the benchmark shifting would probably start from the pandemic, because that changed a lot of how people think about mental health, exposure to it, access to it, even with remote stuff, and also sort of like what people are striving to get treatment for. So it opened up a lot of virtual health, which I think is really good, because a lot of people struggle with like access to care or transportation. So just a very practical part of care. And psychiatry, you can do most of the job for someone who's relatively stable remotely. And then with a much greater success to actually show up.
Sorry.
But in terms of like shifts, I think we've shifted into a culture of like so much emphasis. The primary emphasis is on like individual success. So when someone isn't meeting their individual success, they think something's wrong. So it's this idea that everyone's striving to be like perfect and not realizing that it's normal to be imperfect. So that's why everyone thinks they have like ADHD now, and ADHD assessments are through the roof. ADHD medications are being prescribed like super inappropriately. There's all these like pop-up online just like dispensaries that'll just like give it out, and they're all gotten in trouble lately. But it is, everyone thinks they have ADHD. Like the majority of people aren't trying to like work the system and just get Adderall like for fun. Like they think they have ADHD, but it's because the framework of what's normal has shifted so much, because someone's like, oh, like now I'm not laser focused all the time and working 100% capacity to finish every project. So if I'm ever at 95%, like something's wrong with me and I need to tweak my brain to get from 95 to 100, rather than like, no, a normal human being gets distracted by things, like loses focus, but you can still function and be productive in a way that is like normal. So I think the idea of what is normal has shifted along, like in this country, along with this idea for like individual success by any means. So anything beneath success is considered failure, and everyone wants to be medicated to achieve that. So I think that's been a big shift, as well as just like exposure through social media to people's idea of some good, some bad, of like depression, of anxiety, of all these things, right? Everyone has viewpoints and 90% of them are ill-informed. So I think a lot of people are inundated with ideas that are like, oh, do I have this? Am I this? Why do I think this way? Is that a wrong way? So yeah, it's a combination of exposure and I think like a cultural shift that has led people to seek care. So it's good and bad, because some people need the care, but some people are also seeking something that they don't need to.
Fun fact, I thought I had ADHD for like a solid 3 months, exactly for the same reasons that you were talking about, right? But like when
should we talk through that then?
When a new patient comes to you, right, and they tell you like, oh, I think I have ADHD because like I can't focus at work, or like there's all these things going on, and like I see all these symptoms on Instagram, and you can tell like, oh, I don't know if this is actually ADHD. Like, how do you walk that person through that process?
So a lot of it is actually giving them what the appropriate criteria for diagnosis is. And then a lot of it is separating like symptoms versus functioning, because everyone, I think, looks at symptoms and like, oh, I get distracted when this happens. Is that normal? But it's not about symptoms. Like mental health disorders all require dysfunction. So like if you get distracted, if you lose focus, if you like hyperfixate on things sometimes, but at the end of the day, you're maintaining healthy relationships, you're turning in like you're not like, neglecting assignments, you're engaging in your hobbies, right? You can like hold conversations, you get your work done, then there's no dysfunction. And dysfunction, like people can define that differently, but like no one looks at functionality anymore. They look at symptoms. So they just identify symptoms that they want to go away. And like, all right, that's not how you look at it. And then we also look at like different domains. Like if you're fine everywhere, but you just can't focus when you are working from home, that's not ADHD. That's an environmental problem. You gotta like, you gotta tweak your environment, or go to work, or go to a coffee shop, right? So ADHD, like for ADHD specifically, requires dysfunction in multiple domains. So if it's just, yeah, I'm fine, but in this area, I can't focus on my work, it's not a you problem. That's an environment problem, and you got to work on that.
Question. Do you feel like these things became more of what you're aware of this past year, or even in residency, was your mindset about how you were diagnosing or
ADHD? I've developed more of a skill and understanding this year because it's less focused on in training. Training is more of like the other stuff. I mean, the big thing now is I make decisions on my own, right? There's no safety net. So I have to like be confident what I'm doing. And I think it's actually changed. I think one of the biggest shifts that I've seen that I don't love, but it's just sort of like, I think it's like a defense mechanism almost, is I'm a lot less empathetic as a working professional, rather than resident. 'Cause in residency, you have the affordability to like, I don't know, grieve with someone and sort of like forget about their treatment for a little, because someone above you is the one who's really responsible for that. So the nature of my work currently is very much just like seeing patient after patient. So I kind of see in like 30-minute intervals for the most part. So even if there's like a lot of like hurt and grief and like depth of what someone's talking to me about, within that time, I'm really just laser focused on how can I treat this person best? What medication makes sense? What plan makes sense? And then by the time I have all that formed, I immediately I have like 1 minute until the next patient comes. So I just forget about the patient. I think that's good. Like it helps me stay on track and helps me focus in a half hour at a time, but it prevents me from ever truly like sitting and thinking and just like empathizing with someone, because I think I just really don't have like the practical time to. But I do wish I did. Like I think there's a lot of value in, especially even from my own perspective, like burnout and valuing my day, or right. I think there's a sense of, I feel very robotic in it. It's tough. It's definitely a major shift from residency that I miss. You know, in residency, you'll even sit down and talk to your colleagues about it. You'll talk to your attendings about certain patients and how they affected you and how like the impact they have. And so there's none of that. It's very different now. So I think that's probably the biggest change in kind of my approach. Because at the end of the day, my main role, I see it, like I don't see it as empathizing. My main role is treating, and it's very hard. I don't have the time or bandwidth to do both all the time.
Yeah, and I think you do a good job of that in general. And so it kind of confirms how this is where you're meant to be.
Yeah, I think what I should do more is process on my own, like in the evenings. And even if it's not about a specific patient, but sometimes every once in a while, I'll think back and like, oh my gosh, like, I don't know if this sounds, this might sound like conceited, but like, I've changed the trajectory of a lot of people's lives in the last year, like completely. Yeah. People who are like suicidal, people who are hopeless, people who are in like the depth of depression or like panic attacks that are ruining their life. And then they're so much better. And I don't really give myself enough credit to like think back on it. And it would also be good practice to just sort of remind myself of the hurt people have and sort of like why I'm doing it, right? The why. I think sometimes I get too focused in on the job and, you know, doing this as a means of like provision for my family and that sort of stuff, rather than, I don't know, seeing the big picture, I guess.
Yeah. As a doctor, do you think it's possible to balance the empathy and the treatment at the same time in a way that's healthy for you? Like, can you get the best of both worlds?
I would probably need people around me to bring that processing or conversations out of me, because I don't do the type of thing on my
Won Hee.
own. Or my wife.
I know, but
No.
it's like a strength I have for everyone. Not everyone, but for a lot of people besides you.
But the truth
And
is, I probably don't invite those conversations much, because to be honest,
Yeah,
I don't like want you to bring those up, because when I have time on my own, I don't really want to talk about that kind of stuff. I want to relax or work out or.
But also
whatever.
to credit you, there are times you do share like a brief, oh, this patient, wow, like, you know, and you don't give me details or stuff, but you do take time to, in that moment, quickly process something if it has affected you. So I do agree the effect on you has been more robotic, but also you do your best to empathize on the back end.
Once you're able to do that reflection and empathizing, does that help you? Because I think over the last 36 hours that we've hung out, I think you've mentioned burnout after a long day multiple times, right? Like, does that processing, reflecting, building a little bit of that empathy help you with that?
I don't know. In theory.
In theory, right?
I'm not burnt out emotionally. I'm burnt out because my mind just is going nonstop for 9 hours straight on a busy day, because I have no gaps. So yeah, my burnout, like, I think it would help because I would like value my time spent a little bit more, but that's also not the main cause of my burnout.
So it's more of like
it's a mental burnout.
Yeah.
But it's not an emotional burnout.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. That makes sense.
I think screen fatigue is real, and that's something that post-COVID has been like shown in different people's like inability to separate work or whatnot. But also you are one of the few people I know whose work is like constant back to back on the screen. So that is a type of burnout that I wouldn't really know because I'm just talking to Evan all day.
I have an adjustable desk that I've never adjusted. I should at least stand.
Yeah.
Right. Like that could change it up a little bit or something. Is there anything else you would want to share about your work, like in the psychiatry side, before I kind of shift a little?
It is interesting, and this maybe is kind of a segue, sort of the balance between like mental health and faith, because there's this sort of like obedience and turning to God that is very foundational. But then I think there's also like the science and the like real ability to like help the way people think from like a neurochemical way and from like a development of healthy techniques and ways to view themselves in the world kind of way that, I mean, I guess it's all related to God, but it's separate from like faith as a whole. So yeah, I think a lot of stuff it can be both sides. Like it can be discounted or it can be overemphasized. But yeah, I mean, there's certainly, so when I've heard pastors like discount it, like in a way it's like the solution is like prayer, right? Or is this, and I'm like, sure. But also the 30 patients I've seen this week who's now they have an ability to like function in their lives and think and feel and like spend time with their family because of like medications, right? Like that's a God-given gift too. And that's like something we're supposed to use. So it's a balance that is kind of like interesting, but I think an important one for people to kind of think on, of realizing both are, I think, tools we're supposed to use as like Christians. And it's not just this like black and white thing, right? Like we wouldn't do that in any other part of medicine. And I think like we're treating the brain, like everything we do is as much treating the brain as it'd be to like prevent like migraines, right? Like there are chemical imbalances people have, like trauma. People who have been through trauma, like regions of their brain, like sizes are different, and the amount of like transmitters they produce. So like it's as much of a medical field that to throw that science away just because it's like under mental health and be like, no, like this is the thing that's like a spiritual thing only is silly. And that's like discounting, I think, also a tool that God has shaped and given humans to use.
Yeah. No one's saying like, don't take that antibiotic, just pray, you know? Like, yeah. I've been thinking a lot about like how physical and mental health are actually kind of similar, you know, because I think I've been thinking a lot about like what it means to be mentally healthy. And over the last year, I thought, oh, if I just fix this one thing about myself, then I'll be healthy, you know? Or like, oh, if I just get out of this funk, then I'll be healthy. But like, you know, when you're talking about physical health, you don't just work out once and then all of a sudden you're healthy, you know, and you're in shape. And I'm realizing that like mental health is similar. You don't just fix a mysterious issue and then all of a sudden you're healthy. It's like a ongoing mental workout that you go through, you know, and some people need it more, some people need it less, but like all of us to a degree need that like upkeep. And I think that's like a big realization that I've been having over these last few months. So like, how do I keep myself healthy routinely, you know, not just like, oh, I need to fix myself.
I'd love to ask you more on that. We're about to get to you on here. Last thing I wanted to ask you is, as a psychiatrist, you know, there is a difference between that and then the therapy portion, right? And so as a psychiatrist, how has that either one affected or even enhanced, I don't know, your view of your own mental health? Your wife has some own thoughts, but I'd love to know
your
your
podcaster or wife speaking right now.
Dr. Koller, please chime in.
I mean, I guess every once in a while I can take a step back and I can like analyze myself from a professional point of view, I guess. I mean, usually the conclusion I come to is I'm pretty fine.
Especially because you have to work with like the medication side. So you conclude you don't need medication. Is that something? Like trauma.
Sure. I mean, that's a pretty like narrow scope.
Would you give yourself medication?
No. I mean, it helps me self-evaluate better and more often. I mean, I think I'm in a reasonably decent place. So it's not like I'm uncovering like illnesses about myself that I didn't realize before. But it does help me. Honestly, I think like the training I had as like the therapy side for myself helps me more, because that's more about like challenging, how the way I grew up affects me now, how like the way I form relationships, the way I kind of see the world around me, being able to like be self-critical. I think that type of stuff I'm much better at now than I would have been, 10 years ago or something. And I think it helps me in how, actually, this is a better answer. It helps me the most in how I inherently want to treat other people, because I very rarely want to condemn anyone now, because people's like individual stories that now I realize like how much, even like a one event that maybe happened 10 years ago can like dramatically shape so much about how someone is now, right? So if someone has this like unpleasantness about them, or like a personality trait, or a quote unquote flaw, I think I just naturally assume it comes from a very real place that I don't understand. And if I can't understand it, then I can't condemn them for it. I can I can see like the things people do wrong, I guess, but like I don't see people as like good or bad as like I used to. I think I see people as having been influenced by so many factors that I'm not in a place to kind of like condemn or judge people. So I think it takes a lot for me to like truly think badly of someone, because I don't think I have the right to, without knowing what led them to this like way that they are.
And usually, right, if you ever do find out what that reason, that just leads to more empathy rather than judgment, because you understand them. Yeah.
So Won Hee. Someone who might not have yet gone to a psychiatrist yet, which doesn't have to be some traumatic event. It could also be for things that you had just shared, Matt, Dr. Koller, but
yeah, please.
Okay, I don't have a comeback. I'm curious, like, as you're listening to this, how do you relate within your own mental health journey, as everyone has one? What kind of sticks out to you? And I'd love to kind of just point the light onto you.
That's my worst nightmare. Getting the light pointed at me.
You can either deflect the light or
tell me about yourself.
I'll tell you all day. I'll tell you. Let me start my therapy session, and then by the time it ends, I was still talking.
Like my reactions to what I was talking about,
or maybe what in what he said resonated with you, and why.
I think.
Also, 9 sometimes need more time. So if you want me to have this question posed to you and then we come back to you for your answer, that's also fine, because they have something called the internalized fog. So,
I do have a lot of internalized fog.
Yeah, so I totally understand if you need a little bit more processing time.
Yeah, maybe. I might need it.
Okay, but the question.
Do you have another question?
So don't forget, what has resonated.
Yeah.
No, I don't right now. Well, what about that ADHD thing that you were wanting to kind of...
Oh, my ADHD. Yeah. So the biggest reason that I thought I had ADHD, there's 2 big reasons. Number one, I work from home. I've worked from home since 2017.
After your first 2 years post-grad, you've worked from home.
Yeah.
Pre-COVID,
yeah. So I've always worked from home. And, my level of focus, you might say, has not always been the greatest. My former roommates can tell you, and they always tell me and remind me that, maybe they come home after they finish working. I'm just like watching YouTube, and who knows how long I've actually been on YouTube, and things like that. Or like when the 3 of us play board games, and you guys like to leave the TV on, like watching The Office or like watching football or something. If I'm facing the TV, it's like a guaranteed loss for me, because I focus more on the TV than the game. And the same is true like when I'm at a restaurant or like Pluckers or something like that, so those were like big reasons why. And then you come across Instagram and they have these reels of like, you might have ADHD if you like wake up and feel anxious, or like you wake up and like you look at your phone the first thing, like little things like that. And so that's why I thought I had ADHD. But I think reacting to Matt's conversation. It's like,
okay, processing out loud.
Those are all symptoms, those are all symptoms that like, I work from home. Like there's no one else keeping me accountable. When I'm around other people who are working, it's very easy for me to focus, because like I can focus. Like I'm in that environment, When I'm playing board games and I see the TV, I just happen to like flashy things. And so, I have thoughts about like different domains of my life where I can be better, but I'm like a functional human being that is like relatively healthy, you know? So I don't, yeah.
Who gets promoted a lot too sometimes, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know.
I've gotten, it's been a little while, but yeah, that has happened to me before. Yeah.
I'm like, oh, very cool for
Yeah.
you.
Thank you. Yeah.
I mean, it could also be like imposter syndrome in general.
Oh, for sure.
Right? So
Yeah.
it's interesting to hear you.
Yeah. I've been thinking a lot about like what are the core reasons why I get distracted or don't end up being as productive as I want to be. And I think there is like a big, like, it's a mix of imposter syndrome and perfectionism and this main question of like, can I actually do the stuff that I'm being asked to do? And then like worrying that I can't, so I'm not going to try, you know?
And even like if you have this role title, should that title role be watching YouTube, you know? Which like
100%
could be a yes, that's fine. But in your mind, it's like that should not equate. So hence something must be wrong, which is kind of exactly what Matt was saying.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Dr. Koller. Wow.
Yeah. Another question you might want to ask yourself is, if you turn the TV off when we're playing games, what place would you get then? It might still be the same.
He got middle yesterday. He sat away from the TV purposefully.
Yeah.
And I lost.
My average would go up slightly. Is all I'm saying.
Okay.
Is all I'm saying.
Slightly. That's true. But the functioning result would still be.
I've been playing a lot of board games at my place recently with some friends, and I also do not win there.
Okay.
But I don't get last usually. But yeah, I think there's a lot of kind of that like imposter syndrome, perfectionism, and then like it ends up making me question like who I am, you know, like as a worker or like as an employee and stuff. And like, you know, it's all stuff that like no one is like vocalizing. It's all like kind of in my head, you know? And so there's a lot of those kinds of realizations of like, how do I get out of that headspace, you know? Yeah.
And I think that's interesting. Like we just end up defining these things for ourselves. And so whatever that might be cultural, that was like implanted in us growing up. So people have different standards of what success is and whatnot. I do have another question for you, Matt, because, you know, I used to volunteer for Mustard Seed Generation, had ex-director Sharon Kim on the podcast once. And in general, Korean Americans 33% tend to struggle with depression and mental health problems, but they're 3 times less likely to seek that help. And that's just like a statistic specific to our ethnicity. But I am curious, one, what is your Asian American? Is that too much HIPAA? I don't really know. But like, would you say it's pretty like mixed in terms of that sense? So do you notice any trends in general about that? Even then pointing back to Won Hee and something you mentioned in a offline conversation, again, how we identify or whatnot. Just kind of want to pose that topic out there.
So I mean, I have some Asian patients. I think what I've noticed, which might play into it, and this is a speculation, this isn't grounded on any like thing scientific. I've noticed with at least the patients I have that struggle with depression or anxiety, it's a lot less external. So it's less of like the can't stop crying, like panic attacks, you know, just like this restlessness that they can't control, which I think if you have less external symptoms, it's less noticeable to others and you might be less prone to be like encouraged to get help. It might be less obviously debilitating, but it's a lot more of this like internalized, like I am worthless, like I can't do these things.
Snap here with my clammy hands.
Or like I'm paralyzed by like fear, insecurities, and these things. And I think that like those people, it's a lot harder for those types of people to seek help, right? Because other people or people close to them aren't necessarily seeing it. And B, it's probably not even as obvious to the person. It's like like there's something missing rather than, oh no, like this is actually like like clinical depression kind of thing.
Or see if they feel like that, how could they use up that hour when they could be actually doing more towards their goals?
Yeah, and I mean, it's true. A lot of it comes, you know, people talk back to their like upbringing a lot. So yeah, I do think there's like a culture of keeping things internalized that just builds and builds and people don't see it, people don't identify it. People don't like know you in that way. They maybe see like a facade that you're able to put on in certain groups, but then it like builds and you probably get treated a lot later, which kind of goes to that statistic or not at all. So I mean, I think those numbers kind of make sense even based off what I've seen.
Does that all fall into like clinical depression?
Sure. I mean, yeah.
Like all the stuff that you're describing about like feelings of helplessness.
Yeah. That's all.
Can non-psychiatrists diagnose depression?
Yeah.
Okay. So, you know, like for you, like one of the differentiations is the medication prescription, right? And not all people necessarily need the medication prescription part of it, or can also get it in different ways. What else would you recommend in addendum to medication?
Yeah, so I always tell people that what medications are really good at is reigning in control of emotions that are uncontrollable. So when emotions are at a point where they are affecting your ability to just live a normal life because you just are so sad or you're so anxious or you get so easily overwhelmed that you just can't like do normal tasks, medications are very good at reining those in. What they don't do is change the actual issue that's like causing stuff, right? The core symptoms. So, I mean, therapy is the 1A of treatment for like everything mental health related. It's never a medication. Medication is always supplementary. I've heard it phrased in a way like medications are the point to get you well enough to engage in therapy. If you're already well enough to engage in therapy, then maybe you don't need medications. And you know, that's like an overly simplified way of thinking about it. But yeah, at the end of the day, if you're incredibly sad because your partner died, I can help the sadness, but I can't help you understand like process like where those emotions are coming from, like how you express those behaviorally, all this stuff, right? You uncover that stuff in therapy. So yeah, I mean, I'd say therapy is almost always the first place to start unless there's a reason not to, like you don't have the time or the money or something. So yeah, everyone needs an outlet, right? It's very hard to understand yourself on your own. People are trained to help do that and to like guide you through ways of thinking and identifying, you know, stuff from your past or whatever it might be. Or even, you know, there's like nowadays cognitive behavioral therapy is like this, like the buzz thing for everything. But it's like,
oh, that's CBT.
Yeah. And essentially
that's what my psychologist.
Yeah, but it's all right. That's like essentially learning how to challenge cognitive distortions and in a way that helps you like approach things better, like behaviorally. So it's like it's very practical. So yeah, I mean, I encourage people just to seek an outlet. I don't think you need a therapist all the time if you have the right people around you. But sometimes people who don't know you but are trained to elicit responses and like ways of thinking, that's hard to do. Like that takes a lot of training. I'm not particularly even good at that compared to good therapists. So yeah, if you're struggling, if your relationships aren't helping you dig into yourself in a way like that you need to, then yeah, I mean, that's probably the place to start. So I think this is something that, I mean, even you went through to a degree, and I think you ended up starting your own therapy in the last year or two. So yeah, what was kind of your process to getting started? Something like that.
Thank you for this.
Tables have turned. Who's the interviewer now?
Yeah, no, I think in general, it's the end of 2023, and the way certain circumstances have happened, I'm about to terminate therapy. And I'm I'm the emotional me.
And that's a good thing. Terminating is a good thing.
It is. The relational side, you know, this is someone that I have shared the deepest and darkest parts of me and my struggles for the last 3 years. And yeah, I know. Even like I would ask a few of my counselor friends, like, what's the longest time you've had a client? What's the average? Like, how do you feel when you terminate? And ultimately, I wanted to hear them say like, I'm sad, because I'm so sad that I hope she's sad.
You want your therapist to be sad to be terminating you.
Yeah, like in an emotional way, not sad because I shouldn't, you know, I think
she's sad
she
because
believes.
You're not paying her anymore.
Probably that too. Yeah, that's true, honestly. But, you know, there is a part of me that has just been so thankful. And I think it's also, as I've shared here before, like that I've had someone fortunate enough to share so many important identities of mine, which is like faith-based, Korean for me, and like also like a mother, a wife. Not that she shares her personal life with me, but the fact that I just know that. So there's like an understoodness about certain things that I have struggled with. I think as I'm listening to you, Matt, too, I realized like why I needed that, because at that time, you know, we had close friends, but it was almost like a fear to share these darker feelings I was having, and having her be that space was so pivotal for me. In different seasons, like it got better, but then it wasn't. And what you had mentioned too about like uncontrollable type of emotions, which did lead me to have to also have certain medications, but that also created a baseline where I was able to really go into therapy with success, you know? And so today, like this last year, we rave about how Dallas has been in life a game changer for us. But I also think that means like the things I do have in place now are like supportive sisters, like accountable in the ways I need them to be accountable. It doesn't mean friends in the past were not, but it's in ways like I need to sustain and certain things like that. And so that leads to not needing my therapist. And I'm so sad about that. And so I'm like preparing these, like I'm doing a wellness recovery plan to make sure I have things in place, because as we terminate, I just like need to do the reflections. Like, what are my triggers? What are certain things that are the beliefs I carry? And so, yeah, I mean, I'm just sad. And
we should send her a Christmas card.
I don't know how
People
much.
do that.
A Christmas card. That's true.
Yeah.
I could do that. I was thinking about sending her a present, but I wasn't sure if like you can receive monetary
but it's like
things.
It's like a fine line.
Right.
Christmas card's probably fine.
That's true. I can send her a Christmas. Oh, good idea. When we're in Clear Lake, I want to go see her. She said I could, because I mean, therapists, no, I mean, you see therapists in person as a mom. And one of the things I'm so grateful for about what like virtual therapy is that I have been able to see her virtually for 3 years, but I've never seen her in person. But yeah, like she supported like a lot of faith sides, where you mentioned earlier, even like what that tension between faith and science of mental health. And like, I think she did this beautiful job of marrying those two, understanding my values, approaching first holistically, but also understanding when I did need a science neuro approach.
Now that it's been 3 years and you're coming to the end of this journey, I feel like there's this perception that like you go to therapy and you just get your problems fixed and you're like good to go, right? Like kind of like what I was talking about before. But as someone who's coming to the end of this stint and hopefully, you know, last stint of therapy, what do you think the journey has been like for you, right? Like where, at what point do you feel like, oh, this is like working really well? You know, like, do you feel like you saw a point where like, oh, things are turning for the better and this is actually working?
I think it was like, one, really going to her for all of my like crazy things, like that I was like, this is weird. Why would I feel like a bad person for thinking this way about someone, or I can't believe I would feel this way about myself when I've had a decent childhood or an upbringing. Like, how dare I? Like shame-based things that I felt. And so one, being able to go to her for those things, and then even like bringing Matt to some sessions when we've had to, like, that was always a huge part of my personal stories. And so she knew me as a person, right? Which is like the beauty of therapy, is like she took that time to get to know me. And then I think it was honestly this year, because when we first moved to Dallas, we were like still really bad and life was still really, really hard, and it still is. But one of the things like shifters was even like her knowing like what I needed. I was looking for a mentor, and so like celebrating when I did find that in real life, you know, like not that she's not real life, but like in accessible time here where I live, right? And then knowing I needed some like books for myself. She recommended one she knew would be good for me. And then she also said, hey, why don't you do a book club, because you need social support. That's super important to you. Let's ideate like who that could be or whatnot. And so then like that, then shout out to that group, right? Like that's more in person now. Like this is somebody I know, like when I struggle and my minds could take me somewhere about marriage or whatnot, or child, like motherhood or whatever, like I can go to certain places, like certain friendships, and know that like that will be a place where I will be faced with the responses I almost need to get myself back into gear and whatnot. And then, yeah, like lastly, just, I don't have a lastly. I just thought it would sound smart to say lastly.
You sounded smart.
I did.
It would have sounded smarter if you had
but
something.
But the inability to lie, to fake it.
Yeah, she's a good therapist. I would never think of like offering those suggestions.
Yeah, and there was one time, you know, like for me,
that was the worst.
For me, that belief carried into my walk with the Lord, right? If we're talking through faith, and like I felt ashamed to go to God, right?
Yeah,
and in that time when I couldn't muster up the words even, there was one session where she created like a page of verses and that I could like speak to my, and I was like, oh my gosh, you know, and like, I'm sure she does something different with each client she has, but like that was what I needed, because at that point I couldn't do that myself. And now I'm at a place where I can do that myself, which also shows, right, where I am, and we can terminate and be celebrating that. But I think those are things that like, she has been that ear that I've also not been able to share with others. And so super grateful for that. And yeah.
That's awesome. The reason I asked the question is because I know this is something I've thought about for myself a lot, is like, I don't want to think of myself as like someone who needs to go to therapy.
Yeah.
You know,
I
and
know.
I think that's like a conception that a lot of people
Yeah.
have of like,
Yeah.
I don't want to admit that I'm like broken or like that I need help. And so like when there's this feeling of like, okay, like I'm just gonna go and figure out like what the root cause is and like
And then
get a solution to that root cause and then I'll be fine, you know? And I was reading this book, Lord Gottlieb or something like that, and she was saying that like therapy is not about finding that solution. It's like it goes deeper than that. It's like recognizing that like, oh, I'm not okay, you know, I am a broken person and I need help. And like it's about going through that process and like building yourself up and like finding the skills to like put yourself in a better place, you know, and not just like, oh, my life sucks because of X. Let
Yeah.
me solve X,
Yeah.
you know?
And that's how I
agree.
felt, because I would want to bring Matt into therapy or sessions with me, and but this is going to be the life-changing one
Yeah,
here, and then I would
yeah.
leave feeling disappointed because a lot of it was marriage based too, right?
Yeah.
I think I felt that because she never like took my side, which like I think it's important to find sisters that will take your side and like be there for you. And maybe there are certain things that are happening, but also she would always challenge me. What can I change? What is it on my end versus him? And I think that, along with shameless plug, like being really into the Enneagram, like I have worked to like try to understand Matt more. What is a 9 like? Or but also what is Matt like that I can't understand? And like why am I grateful for Matt in different ways? And Matt's just the example I'm using because I've shared that before. But I think that was helpful, was that she really, I knew she was on my side, but by being on my side doesn't mean not making sure I knew how I could show up in the marriage when I didn't want to.
Yeah.
In that, I've also now been able to find that in real people, not real people, but you know, like
Yeah.
in my community,
Like in your own personal life. Yeah.
And that's because I also frame it differently too, versus before, even as I would frame it, it would just be to have someone empathize with me because
Yeah.
like I like blah. Yeah. But
Yeah.
sorry, you were going to say something. I cut you off, Dr. Koller.
No, I mean, I agree very strongly. It's like a really hard thing to recognize because they are like can feel so similar. Yeah, I think so many people are seeking to fix the thing that's causing them distress rather than asking the question of what is it about me that reacts in this way that brings out that distress, right?
Yeah.
I mean, mental health, it's all about a change in your own response or perception or like the emotions that come out of you or the way you respond. But it's like it's a you thing. Like, environmental stuff like impacts it and it brings it out. But the question is, how do I change what it brings out? Not how do I change?
Yeah.
Because that's sustainable, right? Because if that is removed, a year later you might encounter something else that brings out. So what's sustainable is it's the you part.
Yeah.
Which I think is also a very like Western centric way of thinking of it's not a me thing. Like I'm me
I'm fine.
and the me is exactly how I should be.
Yeah.
Right. It's not much self reflection or self betterment. It's how do I modify the environment to
If I had
help
more
me
money,
to-
if
yeah.
I lived in a nicer house.
Yeah. So I think we probably think about all that a lot differently here than other places in the world.
Yeah.
Too.
I've been realizing a lot, like kind of like through this conversation, just like reflections I've been having. I think like bringing it to like the faith part a little bit too is like part of like that first step in the gospel is like, I am a sinner, like I'm a broken person, and it's admitting that you're a broken person. And that's how we come to like accept the grace, you know, and like, yeah, I can't solve my issues by myself. No matter how hard I try on my own, no matter how hard I try to be like perfect and good, I'm going to like fall short, you know? And I think for like the three of us, like faith is a big part of like how we think about the world, how we think about what causes us stress and pain. And I realized like, I kind of like through these conversations, it's like, yeah, part of getting healthier mentally is also like acknowledging that like, yeah, I am kind of messed up, you know, from this world, like my past experiences, even if like my past experiences were fine, like I am kind of a broken person. So like, how do I seek out that healing through what God has like in store for me, you know, and trying to look for that rather than like, I can push through, you know, I can like grit my teeth and like, if I try hard enough, I can like bury the pain, you know? Yeah.
One of the things I have to prepare for tomorrow, my last session, is like a wellness recovery plan. Which some of the questions, and I'm realizing this is what's going to sustain me. It is therapy, but it's also like asking myself, like, in my experience, these are things that support me. And then asking myself, like, how can I help myself sustain that? Like, what is my maintenance plan? what are triggers that start to make me think of unhelpful thoughts? And I think that was important because like you were saying earlier, which you said about Asian Americans, Matt, in general, but in general, the beliefs for me is like the not good enough or the failure or the disposable. And while it could be in settings within marriage, it could also be as simple as like, oh, I wasn't invited to something. For me as like a social too.
That's such a huge trigger for me.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
And it
It's
sounds so...
Yeah, it's so bad.
I mean, social subtypes.
It's so bad.
Because like, it kind of like, it makes me like, oh, and it could be something I even know. I wouldn't really care.
I do not want to go to some of these things, but I want to be invited.
Exactly. And that, then the belief is like, oh, I'm disposable or I'm not something, right? And so like that belief is so, it affects me so much. And so when that happens, like being aware of it, and then I'm still kind of working on like, what can I do to then say doesn't matter, you know, or whatnot. And like what that reaction is then, because I could be like, well, you suck, you know, that's also not the correct response, but like, what does that look like? And then how do I keep moving forward? That's helpful, the triggers portion. And then the early warning signs, I feel like that was something, Matt, you recently did with me, because, you know, there have been times where I get like uncontrollably sad, right? Or like, I don't even know what those emotions, how to handle those, because I didn't really experience those till post, I'd say, marriage, which is why maybe I inadvertently saw the marriage as a problem or whatnot, you know, when that's also not the case. But recently when I did have certain struggles, I think Matt noticed that I like curled up on the couch with a blanket and got really sad. And it's like, I knew it was happening too, but he saw that too. And that's when he like spoke some love into me. And I think that's important, whether it's me understanding early warning signs, but also talking through it with loved ones. Like, what do you notice shifts with me when something happens? And like understanding that, I think, is a good processing thought. So those are just kind of things I realized. And then, yeah, like I'm excited because I feel like not only is my therapy journey ending, but she's equipping me with certain things to fall back on this community that I have and on myself, because I am strong as well. And our marriage is in a great place as well. So, yeah.
And these are all things that you would not have realized about yourself without going through therapy?
I think I would have had these thoughts. I wouldn't know how to structurally navigate it. And so I think what therapy has done for me is verbalize it to someone rather than in my head. And then with that, hear like, why do you feel this way? You shouldn't think that about yourself, or whatever, like things like that. And then now I can just like XYZ. Before it was like all the alphabet jumbled together, so I don't know how to piece it together. But now it's like, oh, I know this belief means don't go there. Because before, like when you were saying like mechanism, CBT, maybe it was like I catastrophize everything, and I hate that word when she like would mention it. I'm like, I
like that word. I use that a lot with people.
But yeah,
I know it's catastrophize off.
Yeah, but I mean, catastrophe, it sounds like such a big word, you know, but I realize that's what I do. And so when I see a trigger early on, now I can like, whoa. You know, I might not overcome it in the moment, but at least that whoa stops me from the rabbit hole of darkness I went through. Because I would say I was very reflective always.
Yeah.
But therapy is helping me navigate that reflectiveness, because I am not in a place of health. I wasn't in a place of health to do that on my own.
Yeah, and I will say, like, we haven't talked too much about sort of the Christian side of this, but like there is like a thing that a Christian can access that's like pretty remarkable, right? That does cover. So I hate when people are like, well, you shouldn't be sad. Like, always find your joy in Jesus. So like, if you're sad, just think of Jesus and find your joy. It's like, that's stupid. Like that's not how people work. It's insensitive. That's not how humans work. But what there is if you are stuck in sadness, like at some point you can remind yourself that there's an outcome where you're not sad. And at some point that transforms, I think, someone into getting out of their sadness, because there's a hope, right? There's a finality of like everlasting joy, of eternal life, of like protection, of a God who sort of like knows your future and knows you. I think there is like this idea we can access that like does bring a sense of peace and comfort that nothing else can. But what it also isn't is this like light switch of like, all right, happy because I believe in Jesus, right? Like, so yeah, it's like there's multiple parts, but it's hard for me to imagine because the majority of people I see, I mean, I guess the majority, a large number are not Christians, and it does make me sad, just like thinking, man, if they did know Jesus and believe in him, then like there is this thing that they could have that like is a game changer. So that connection to God, I don't want to discount it.
Right.
Like that's probably still the most important thing. But there's just such a part of the process
Right.
that mental health care can be a part of, that is like a good thing, like a faithful thing even. Yeah.
Did you want to share anything on your own therapy journey?
My own therapy journey.
Yeah.
Had a few sessions under your belt, right?
I do have a few sessions under my belt. It's been an interesting experience. I think I started it about a year ago now, but it's been on and off a lot. And I think as I've been listening, I'm like, ooh, I don't know if my relationship with my therapist is like this. I was sharing this a little bit with them yesterday, and I don't think he's ever going to listen to this. So, if you're out there, I'm sorry.
We'll put you on as Won.
But he's like a cool guy. Fun to hang out with him, but he's not like the type to like really engage kind of that level, And so I don't know. I've kind of been thinking recently about like what it's like to, maybe I should look for a new one. Maybe I should find someone who can like kind of speak to more of the things that you were kind of talking about. Yeah. I think there were topics we've covered in our sessions include like him doing Legos with his son, him playing bass, like things like that, like, which is great, right? I think he shares these stories with a point to like get across to me, to relate. Yeah. But I'm realizing like, I don't know if that's like how I relate.
Yeah.
There have been a few good sessions where I just like vent everything, which is really good. It's a process. It's a journey. Yeah. 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 I think it's a big blocker. I don't know how to like convey my thoughts, right? Like classic 9, like the fog is real, And so even if I do go to therapy, sometimes I wonder like, what am I even supposed to say when I'm here? So I think having someone who can draw those things out of me is going to be like super important for whoever I do end up working with. So
as 9s, I feel like in general, there is this falling asleep to passions or falling asleep to yourself in different ways. I feel like both of you have had an awareness to mental health. So what does that mean for you guys in 2024? Or if that's too broad, then maybe to say like, what are your triggers? Like a question to reflect for like tangible self-awareness. Like what are your triggers as 9s who might easily suppress triggers? Matt, you can only say one thing about me, okay?
No, I think...
Make it not be hurtful.
No, my trigger is when I... in my own limited viewpoint, I see a scenario that I deem unfair. So like, so for me, if we do want to do like the marriage part of it,
justice,
if I
the desire for justice.
If I see a reaction from you towards me that I can take a step back in my own limited viewpoint, like think about, and I cannot come to a conclusion where I feel like it was deserved, that's a big trigger point, and it completely affects the way I respond and interact with you.
Make it about me.
But so that's that's a narrow example, but that goes broadly, right? Yeah. If I'm out around other people, even in sports, like in every aspect of my life, I don't care if people do things that I don't like or that like I don't necessarily line up with. But if I see a situation where someone is like reacting, responding in a way that is undeserved, it elicits like this strong emotional response from me that otherwise I don't have strong emotions. Right. Like that's one of the few things that does. So for me, that's a trigger point. And so when I feel that directed at me, here's an example in a very like less serious way. If someone like is playing a sport with me, I think I've brought this up before.
Yeah.
If someone's playing a sport with me and they are conducting themselves in a way on the court, and not like behavior wise, but even like
you think you're better than you are.
Yeah, like they're trying to play a sport in a way that like
stay in your lane.
They're incapable of, but they don't see it. So in a sense, they're like doing this injustice of trying to do something that's like hurting, like if they're on my team, that's like hurting our team because they refuse to acknowledge that what they're doing is like out of their skill set. It makes me very upset. But if someone who's bad, like let's say I'm playing basketball with someone, if I pass to someone who's bad, they're open for a 3, they shoot the 3 and they like miss it, I don't get mad at them. Like, keep shooting it. Like, this is what you're doing. Like, you're there. You're like, this is your role. You're out here. But so so that's like a.
But if they were like, give me the ball, give me the ball.
If they were like demanding the ball or just like dribbling up the court and just like jacking up a 3, and if they're good, go for it. If it's within your skill set, but if you're not, like, that's annoying. That makes me upset. So the whole range of spectrum. When I see something that I deem like a unfair representation of someone like imparting something from themselves onto someone else when it's undeserved or unwarranted, that makes me mad.
Yeah. That's so funny how you just like explained the gut triad and the desire for justice, because that's in the 8, 9, and 1 in such a simple way. Okay, what about you? What's a trigger?
Oh man, this is something I've been thinking about a lot. I think a big trigger for me is the feeling of, well, any action that leads me to feeling like excluded, you know? So like not being invited, like even if it's like not a friend group that I'm a part of, not something that I'm like particularly interested in doing, but like I know people there. It's like, oh, I wish I was there. I wish they thought of me. When I'm hanging out at home on a weekend, I'm like, well, I have no plans today. No one's saying anything to me. Am I like, do I have friends? Like those kinds of things. It's like very easy for me to go down, and like, yeah, it leads to a lot of those feelings of like, am I wanted? Like, do people even like think about me? You know, and like,
The presence matters.
Yeah. Core,
you know,
core and like it's like one of those things
motivations.
where it's like such a like I don't like giving into those thoughts because
Yeah.
like obviously like people care. Like,
Yeah.
I know people care, and like I have really good relationships with people, but like, do I fall into the category of people that get thought about?
Right.
You know.
Right.
Yeah. So.
No, I appreciate that. And it's then you can, if you have that, then you know where that comes from. And then you can speak the opposite back into yourself, or like the truth back into yourself, or find a better way. But I don't know the better
Who knows? This is why I need to go to therapy.
I know.
This is what therapy in 2024
But I
is
was
for.
curious for you, Matt, when you were talking about your like examples, what is the belief that comes out of it?
I don't understand the question.
No, because like, right, with a trigger, what's a belief, or with a trigger, like what does that lead to with like the uncomfortable thoughts in yourself? Is there an example of that?
I mean, I guess this isn't deserved. It's like if it's not deserved, then it's on
do
you.
it.
Like,
Yeah.
you shouldn't do that.
Yeah. But if it, interesting, we'll talk about it another time because I really have to pee. Okay. Well, is there anything else you guys want to say?
Well, as a 9, you know, if you need to pee, I'm not going to make you stay here. So there's the end of that conversation.
Okay, because I did want to end it with, you know, like as we talked through this, what is a 2024 goal we would share here?
Could be anything.
Anything, if possible, relate to this broad topic? Not like, I want a 6-8-pack again.
Oh.
That was literally
My goal for 2024 is to be as fit as I was in 2022. That would be my personal
just
goal.
said not to say 8-pack, but
Because I'm far from it. I don't know, a mental health or like a personal,
a
like
personal
betterness related goal. I mean, it would probably be goals regarding me and you, like husband, marital goals, just like as you minded of a way that I can like possibly be, I guess, right? Because there's sometimes where it's like hard because there are like a trigger or whatever, but right, I think like it's the one relationship where I should, you know, lay down myself or whatever for the sake of you. And I think there's a lot of times where like I can do that even if I'm like really not feeling like it's deserved, right? It's one time where I should counter the feeling of injustice if I'm feeling in that moment for the sake of you. That would probably be my goal in that sense.
goals are usually like measurable. That sounds very broad, but okay, Mr.
I don't know how
Fogger.
to measure that.
All right.
My measurable goal is the fitness one.
Okay.
That's very measurable.
Yeah, that's true.
I think for me, this is not measurable. So, but I think the word that I was thinking was like be more resilient, you know, like,
Oh, like our marriage.
huh?
I said, oh, like our marriage.
Yeah.
Because you were
I
saying that
shared-
earlier.
Earlier, I was talking with Angie about y'all's marriage, and like I was telling her, like, I think the biggest lesson that I've learned from you guys, I feel like I learn a lot of different things from different couples, but the biggest thing I've learned from you guys is like resilience. You guys have gone through a lot, and like you've stuck it through, and like you guys are in a healthier place for it, you know? It's like the resilience of, yeah, things are hard, like things are tough. I was a village meeting recently, and I was sharing like, I don't like effort. I don't like trying, you know, like it's just hard to try. But like, that's such a, even as I say that, that's like, oh, it's like, ugh, you know? And so like the resilience of like when I am going through hard stuff, or like I need to do hard stuff, not to just like fold over, but like, what's the verb of resilience? Like, like persevere,
Ooh.
yeah, through it. So I think that's like what I want 24 to be more of, resilience. Yeah.
How about yourself?
Ooh.
Whoa, I wasn't expecting that. I think for me, this year will be the first year where there will be more hours to myself as we prepare to send Evan to daycare. That comes with a lot of mom guilt in so many ways that I don't need to say here. But I think that also comes with an opportunity to reclaim parts of me that I have felt lost or in the blur in the last 3 years. And so I think even if I think about big picture, therapy ending, and now it's this new season or new chapter, my goal is that I would put these things into practice, and that, I don't know if it's a resolution, but I think, yeah, do things with my time. So for me, that does look like, I guess, 6-pack, but not really. Like do things like exercising, put certain self-care things, like put on sunscreen. Oh, 2024 goal is put on sunscreen.
Yeah, neither of you guys put on sunscreen,
Yeah.
huh?
Yeah. So literally earlier today, I looked at myself in the mirror and I was like,
Wrinkles.
man, my face
Yeah, when you put
is like
sunscreen.
struggling.
Okay, never mind. 2024, put on sunscreen, because, you know, even that, like, at least for me, the sunscreen era happened once I had kids. Like, oh my gosh, you put on sunscreen? But I was like, by then I was like, I don't have time to put on sunscreen, but I have time.
What do you mean you don't have time to
like
put on
my
sunscreen?
mind, that's how my mind works.
I'm
It's
less about sunscreen. I wouldn't mind dabbling in an overall care routine
Skincare?
that'll just like
do your wrinkles. We should go back to Korea.
that'll youthfulinize. I was gonna say euthanize. That's not,
That's not the word.
youthfulinize.
Euthanize is a bad
face.
word.
Euthanize? It's like to like put down your dog, like euthanize your dog.
Oh, sorry, I didn't go to Rice or med school.
Pretty sure UT
But-
people know that term.
But my goal is to, yeah, just like Enneagram coaching. I think that's my goal. Like I've been doing that on the side, but I'm going to like grow that as I work on my part-time job, but then also grow the business and put myself out there in those
girl.
ways. Yeah, girl.
Put yourself out there.
Speaking of, stay tuned next week. There will be a release of some New Year, New You Enneagram discount packages.
Discount.
That's right. If you're worried about where to start in your processing journey, I am not at all a certified anything in counseling, but the Enneagram does allow you to go deep into your soul. And
Because you are a certified Enneagram.
I sure am a certified
Ooh.
Enneagram coach, and I have done quite a lot. And I will walk you through your own journey. And let me just tell you, one of my clients who do the 5-package deal renewed for 20 sessions.
20
Let that
sessions.
speak for itself.
20 sessions. That's
So-
I
4
didn't
times.
even know that. You never told me that.
I did tell you that.
Oh.
I don't think so.
I did, but we'll talk about that offline.
for
Won Hee's
another
getting
debate.
uncomfortable.
This always happens when I'm here. See, I'm telling
let's
you.
end it on a good note. Won Hee, it's been fun to have you over.
This is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so if you come every few months, we can have a podcast in person with my 3 mics.
Oh, this is great.
It's upgraded. Yeah. Any last words, boys? My Enneagram Niners.
Thank you for having me on for your 50th.
I know. It's a
podcast.
special.
Wow.
It's a
I'm very
special.
honored.
Congratulations.
You know.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Koller
Koller
Commentary. Bye. Say bye.
Bye.
Am I in that too? Bye.